Hello and warmly welcome to episode 106 of our SAP on Azure YouTube channel. Today is August 18 and together with Holger and Robert, we are here to talk everything and anything related to Microsoft and SAP. Hello, everybody. So anybody who is migrating to Azure is basically looking for an organized and structured way to plan, discover, and design and accelerate the migration to Azure. And here, typically, when I mention those kind of topics, the expression like Cloud Adoption Framework come into place, and also SAP on Azure Landing Zone Accelerator comes here. So we are here more than happy to welcome again Pankaj as a guest. So he was there in the past. He will give us some updates actually on some latest news on SAP on Azure Landing Zone Accelerator, which are not yet published but coming quite soon, maybe even next week. So are happy to have him here. Now, before we start with our special guest, let's go quickly through the topics of the last week and just see what are the news from the last week from the SAP on Azure side. So as I'm alone, and Holger is not there, I mean, what else? The high availability topic, it's my baby there. Very interesting article or a new official document, which we didn't actually have it in the past. It's called about high availability of central services on Linux, on SUSE Enterprise Linux and SUSE 50 more precisely, with a simple mount architecture and NFS. So on Linux, basically, you would have typically, let's say, 2-node cluster with pacemaker for central services, and you would use as a shared file either Azure NFS, Azure files for NFS, or Azure NetApp files. And there you would typically put a SAP MNT and central services file and a SAP trans. Now, what is basically new? It's actually that this is a bit simplified structure. So the pacemaker here, it's not handling in this configuration the files, so not mounting and unmounting. They are all basically mount all the time. There is a super blog from Fabian Herschel from SUSE, from SAP Linux Lab, where he would go into the detail and actually even show some Azure configuration detail. But the point is, this is the difference from the old and new architecture, and file share would be always mounted on both nodes. Of course, they have to somehow make sure that SAP start service and daemon is not automatically started on both nodes. And basically, they have a new way how to control it, and actually a new kind of resource cluster resource, which is introduced here. The whole configuration is basically more simple. There is no mounting and mounting of the file. They would just somehow make sure that the SAP daemon will actually be started only on the active node. In principle, it's more simple. I would say, I would expect failover it's more faster because there is no mounting and unmounting on the file system. Warm welcome for the customer again, /15 for the moment, but let's hope it would be also available on other SUSE releases. Another point is also on the Oracle and also a bit about the high availability. We had a session last week about SAP on Azure and Oracle. And Oracle is supported both on Windows and Linux. Now, many of them, they're also running on Linux. And on Linux, when it comes to high availability, there's always a question about what about the high availability of the central services. Now, we know there is a SAP note which says Oracle is supported on Oracle Linux specifically. And that means the database as well as the client. Now, on Oracle Linux, there is no support for the pacemaker. So now what is basically extended and what is officially kind of announced that And also this is placed in the note that SAP components that do not use the Oracle database clients, as an example, SAP standalone Enqueue and message server, Enqueue application server, so central services, Enqueue application, web dispatcher, and gateway can be actually used by another Linux version like SUSE or the Red Hat. So this is also mentioned in the notes. So let's say SAP NetWeaver component not using Oracle client or Oracle database software, such as central services, can be used on Linux distributions supported by SAP and Microsoft other than Oracle Linux. So at least I know there is always a lot of discussion about this, how to do it with the Oracle. Everything was on Linux. You know, we have to use other than a Linux version than Oracle Linux. So now it's black on white and fully clear. Moving a bit to the past space, you remember surely many blogs. Martin was writing a lot about private links for business technology platform. The point is just as a reminder, business technology platform could of course connect through the public internet, but in the Azure through the private link we will have a secure and fast connection. This is also announced from the SAP as a GA. Now, what is in kind of let's say I would say an improvement, that there is a GA of network security group support for the private endpoints. So which would means that you can you have better granularity to do a security control here. And another basically announcement also about the GA of the user-defined routes support for private endpoints. The main thing is now there is no need to have this 32 address space prefix, but basically you are much more flexible, right? Another interesting point is also that the SAP TechEd, it's been announced in November 15 to 16. What I hear is it will be a virtual possibility, a virtual experience. They are telling it's free. However, there is also ability to have the hands-on lab and also networking opportunity in the Las Vegas. So if you are there, you have also, okay, there is a registration fee, what I can see, so you can also use this opportunity to be on the spot there. One more interesting thing is also about the SAP Quality Check from the Philip Leitenbauer, so very, very useful tool. There is a few other very interesting enhancements apart from fixing of the bug. And this is that he would support also initial use of the GUI, you know, which I will show you quickly. And also he would also support ability to run across the multiple hosts by defining some CSV file. So let me basically just quickly show you how the UI looks. Actually, it should be kind of much more simpler to run it. So I logged to my Azure session. I'm just showing some content of a resource group and the VMs, and here actually I have the quality check file. So basically, actually this is the quality check file. However, what is important is to enable this dash GUI option, and basically, so meaning no need to run it in the command prompt. And here is actually you can also all the users group will be scanned. So if I would choose this one of the resource group, which I was also listing in the behind here in the command line, actually I can choose, it would list also all the VMs, and you can choose for which database you want to run, which is the operating system, the role as well. Here are some default database and log directories. The HANA scenario, if you have it high availability, then you will specify the root name and path. So I don't want to run it now, but people love the UI. I love the UI as well. So just try it. It's really simple to start it. last but not least, it's interesting there, we have also another YouTube channel as well, and they were kind of quite busy with the topic of SAP Deployment Automation Framework, where they go through the discussion of what it is, what is the architecture, what do you need actually to prepare to run. They are going about the feature, what you can do, what is actually supported. And on the end, they are also going through the configuration and runtime. So feel free. I mean, definitely, this is an super interesting topic, always required. And actually, I would say it goes into direction, in some way, into direction of our today topic with our special guest, right? So Pankaj, once more, warmly welcome. You were a guest here. Not everybody would know you, but for those who maybe see you first time, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Thanks a lot, Goran. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Pankaj Meshram. I'm part of a worldwide customer success unit, and I lead the tech strategy for SAP on Azure workloads.
Excellent. So, I mean, typically, you know, when I hear those kind of topics like cloud automation framework, then something Azure Landing Zone, and then there's also SAP Cloud Adoption Framework, SAP on Azure Landing Zone Accelerator. So what's that? I mean, we were having some topics in the past and discussion on this, but maybe just from your side, kind of short summary, what is that all about and what is beneficial when customer would migrate to Azure and run their stuff inside of the Azure?
Absolutely, Goran. Happy to put shed some light on the same. I'll share my screen with some slides here that will help everyone to understand what is SAP Landing Zone Accelerator, and also what are some of the latest updates that are coming both from automation and architecture perspective. Okay. When we talk to the customers, when I'm sure you have seen in a number of customer engagements, any customer who's looking to migrate to Azure, who's looking to move their SAP systems to Azure, one of the biggest hurdles for them is to understand where to start, right? What are the best practices? What are the recommendations? How do we ensure that the journey of the migration, the movement of the SAP systems is safeguarded and they are getting the most value through that migration process itself? Here comes SAP Landing Zone Accelerator for your rescue. If you are managing SAP workloads, it is important to choose a proven cloud platform that has been built and designed to run your SAP workloads. Not only you want the benefits of cloud efficiencies, but you also want performance, agility, and the right kind of flexibility. You know, when we talk about Azure, we talk about reaching to customers with our number of regions available worldwide. We talk about virtual machines, number of options within virtual machines, high performance storage, native tools which are used for operations on SAP systems, for example, Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions, Azure Backup as a native tool. And not only that, in fact, having the ability, having the connectors, the tool sets, the services in Azure, the data services, which helps us to extend and innovate with SAP. Now, talking about the migration process itself, right? The SAP on Azure team has built this set of frameworks, tools, and practices using which a customer can understand what is the process when they are looking to move their SAP systems. And Landing Zone Accelerator sits in the prepare phase of this plan, where we are looking to make a decision. The customer is making a decision in terms of what the architecture is going to look like. What are the intricacies of the architecture? What are the different design decisions that they need to make as part of this workshop, as part of this journey that they're looking to take on Azure? How the target architecture is going to look like? So this is where Landing Zone Accelerator sits and gives us the best recommendations, the policies, the framework which the partners and the customers can take and run through it with their design making process. So effectively, what is Landing Zone Accelerator? It's a value-based offering from Microsoft. It's a value-added offering from Microsoft to our customers, partners who are looking to move or looking to plan the deployment of their SAP systems on Azure. Objective of this program is to empower, educate both customers and partners that they get to know that on all the critical design areas, they are aware of what are the best practices, recommendations, again, something which we have learned from a number of implementations across our customers, right? Effectively facilitating a conversation between all these different teams, whether it's SAP CSA, partner, and the customer sitting in a room. Take this framework, go through this framework, understand what are the best practices, ensure you have staked everything as part of that, right? Helping them to make a target architecture design.
So is it basically a set? I mean, on one hand, you're talking about the best practices and learning, which are part of many documents going through all those different questions: security, scalability, performance, and. Plus, when I see here also word accelerator, for me, it's always kind of, okay, sounds like it's some kind of automation as well, which would speed up and in some kind of standardized way, right?
Exactly. So if we look at all the critical design areas, which I'm going to follow up in the next subsequent slides, networking, identity, ECDR, storage, management and subscriptions. So all this design making points that you need for SAP architecture, what are the best practices and recommendations? So that is something which we have captured as part of this framework that helps all of us to make that right target architecture decision. So for any customer who is looking to migrate, every customer would have certain deviation as well, right? Based on their architecture, based on their set of SAP systems. But this will help them to get that bedrock in place to ensure that they are following all the specific recommendations on all the critical design areas, right? And once they have this target architecture ready, how do we accelerate the deployment of this architecture into Azure? That's where the product SAP Deployment Automation Framework comes into picture. So, you were talking about this video, the YouTube video by our colleagues. That is a perfect example of tying in with Landing Zone Accelerator. So if you look at our current documentation, that's exactly what we are saying. You go ahead through this framework, you design your architecture, and then think about how you're going to automate the build of your SAP systems, the configuration of SAP systems on Azure with best practices. So you're avoiding any sort of configuration drift as well as part of that.
Makes sense.
And one of the best ways to explain this is if you look at this architecture, even before customer thinks of moving their SAP workloads on Azure, they need some sort of foundation, right? So they need some sort of foundational services on Azure, whether it's networking, subscription, management, configuration of all these different artifacts on Azure. So that's why it says 50% of the recommendations are actually coming from that core Azure landing piece. And then 30% is coming from SAP Landing Zone Accelerator. So all the things that we have mentioned, that we have documented, that we have mentioned in our Landing Zone Accelerator framework, that's the one which is coming from 30 piece. Now, I slightly touched about the point of every customer being a little different from each other. They will have different set of systems. They will have different set of tool sets. They will have different set of requirements based on their SLAs. This is where 20% comes into picture, which is bespoke, based on partner who's supporting to the customer or based on the customer itself. So that's why there's 20% headroom for that kind of requirements from the customer.
But when I see 50 plus of generic stuff, and you put 30% of SAP specific on the top, makes 80% of, let's say, reusable content. It's a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, even simple recommendations, right?
Yes.
Accelerated networking. Let's pick up accelerated networking. A lot of times we see it is quite possible that it might have been missed when we are doing it, but when you is doing as part of automation, and we have this this feature on for the VMs which we need to do that, that's going to be always there. That's not going to be missed. And that's just one simplest of example, but I'm talking about a number of different things with all the critical design areas.
Sure.
Another way to explain this is, when you are building homes, you need access to shared utilities like gas, water, electricity. Think of all the things which are coming from Azure Landing Zone as gas, water, electricity, and then your home as everything which you're building for the workload, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah.
Now, I did mention, so again, this is based on Cloud Adoption Framework, and tracking a little bit back, Cloud Adoption Framework, what it does is provides a full lifecycle framework that enables your customers, cloud architects, business decision makers, for that they're setting it up for cloud adoption, right? Whenever customer is looking to migrate, let's say for generic workloads, forget about SAP for a second. They need to understand what is going to be the strategy for the migration. They need to understand how should they plan for the migration? What are the different workloads as part of that migration? How are we ensuring that the right kind of resources, right kind of structure is being built as part of the ready phase? So Cloud Adoption Framework provides you with that full lifecycle framework, tools, processes, services, where you can build an end-to-end cloud adoption for the customer. So one of the phases as part of this is ready, which kind of guides the creation of Azure environments using Azure Landing Zones. And this is where SAP Landing Zone Accelerator fits, because SAP Landing Zone Accelerator, again, is based on top of Azure Landing Zone Accelerator. Now, coming to the architecture here, if you look exactly what I was mentioning in terms of when we are defining the core Azure landing piece, you're thinking about management subscription. What are the services? What are the things that you need to do around management? Thinking about connectivity subscriptions, firewalls, express routes, your DNS, your VNet in different regions, hub VNets in different regions. Management groups, identity. So think of all these things as your shared utilities like gas, water, electricity. And then this is the part which is SAP Landing Zone Accelerator. This is SAP Landing Zone. That's exactly your house which you are building on top of it. And this is where the framework Landing Zone Accelerator comes into picture with all the best practices and recommendations, helping our customers to really get all the best practices as early as possible into the planning phase, into the conversation, ensuring that we are not missing out on any of these things.
Right, but that's actually a good point, because I mean there are millions of details, and you have to search for them. You have to know, and people are forgetting to set it. So when you already have a structured way with exactly what it needs to be done, you're just feeding them the customer environment just to repeat it, something which we already did it in the past, and it was proven that it works, so to say, meaning it's accelerate again the whole migration path, and it makes also safe not to do any mistakes, right?
Exactly, and it also helps them to take the design decisions, right? So if they don't know what they need to do for, let's say, do they want to have hub and spoke model? Do they want to have a vWAN model? Based on the recommendations that we have given, and within the networking section, which is one of the critical design area, anybody can pick it up and say, okay, I've got a global SAP system, I've got global audience, so vWAN makes an obvious choice here. Now, you slightly mentioned and touched on the automation piece. Landing Zone Accelerator again is two-part. So one, which is all the set of frameworks, best practices, which you can see as a screenshot, and I will show you as well in a minute with documentation. Once we have sat down with the customer, once the partner has sitting down with the customer, and the decision had been made on what the architecture is going to look like, the target architecture, the agreed architecture, right? That's where the automation piece comes in. So this is huge amount of work which has gone behind the product, the deployment automation framework, everything which is available in our GitHub repo. That's the GitHub repo link. Of course, our viewers can go into the details of that video, which you were mentioning as a very good demonstration in terms of step-by-step explanation of the product itself. But I'm trying to take a holistic approach here and explaining, yeah, this is one part, and that's the second part where you can join the dots and accelerate not just your design, but also your implementation. Now, coming to the critical design areas, Landing Zone Accelerator typically follows all these 8 critical design areas, and SAP Landing Zone Accelerator follows the same Azure Landing Zone principles, where we focus on all of these critical design areas. Each of these design areas have a set of considerations, recommendations, which have been specifically mentioned for SAP on Azure workloads. So if you look in a typical customer conversation, we try to gather all the requirements for the target architecture in each of these design areas, depending on whether it's a brownfield implementation or a greenfield implementation. Therefore, if you look at the next slide, this is an example of a workshop agenda in terms of what are the things that we can cover with our customers, whether you are looking to understand on specific topics, whether you're looking to understand the whole end-to-end piece. And this is a template that we often use in terms of giving the recommendations on the left-hand side. So talking about what we have in our Landing Zone Accelerator, and then having the discussion with the customers in terms of what is their requirement and what are they going to achieve with it, and then documenting as part of that as well. So finally, at the right at the bottom, we can capture everything based on specific critical design area. And let me show you one of the examples. I was talking about networking here. So yeah, if you look at that, we are talking about using Express Route as a high performance connectivity. Even with an Express Route, if you're using it, if you have availability zones configurations, think about services which are going to span, which are going to be zone redundant. Think about your performance, so not deploying any NVA between application database servers, accelerated networking on the VMs, consider name resolutions, no overlap of IP addresses. So there are a number of recommendations going on within just this one section, right? So this helps to make important design just for the networking piece. Of course, also having giving the ability to see the customers, how this is impacting the other parts of critical design areas as well. And then we document here, then you can go ahead and document what is the requirement from the customer.
So do you already have those prepared documents which they can just reuse it like this one? Okay, either customer or partner or whoever is, yeah, okay,
yeah,
great.
Anybody can take everything what is mentioned in this slide is available on Landing Zone Accelerator. This is an extract of the best practices from the Landing Zone Accelerator. So sure. In a minute, when I show you what are the updates coming, I will show you all the sections as well where we can find the Landing Zone Accelerator documentation and what's upcoming as well in that case.
Right.
Yeah, similarly, going through all the details, I'm not going to go into all of the design areas, obviously. And once we have the understanding on the target architecture, then it comes, how do we deploy that architecture using automation, right? That's where our product, SAP Deployment Automation Framework, comes into picture. This framework, it's effectively built on 2 parts. You have Terraform, which is used for infrastructure provisioning, and then you have your Ansible, which is used for deployment of SAP systems. Idea, again, is to derive value out of the product in terms of whether you're looking to ensure that all the best practices are being followed. You're not missing out in terms of any configuration drift. You're having operational excellence with this deployments. You're saving on your time. You're saving on your cost with the deployment. And ensuring that there's the project lifecycle is basically accelerated because of that.
And there are millions of those details, what you need to set, how to do it. Anytime you do it manually, there's always a danger to forget something or do it wrong, so to say.
Yeah, exactly. There are a number of things around. If we look at our documentation, you will find so many things, like you were just mentioning about Oracle, right? You were mentioning about a couple of configurations around it. You're mentioning about a new feature coming up with Simple Mount. You're mentioning about a couple of other updates. And similarly, there are so many little things that we need to take care of to ensure that the migration, that the build is successful on Azure. And that's exactly what it is capturing. Again, from design perspective, our product is modular. So if you want, you can only take the Terraform piece just to deploy your infrastructure piece. If you want, you can do both the sides. It's an open source as well. So there's a lot of collaboration happening from our customers, from our partners who are giving us constant feedback on the product. And based on that, we are constantly improving the product as well. So we have a lot of feedback coming in from customers. We have a lot of changes which are coming in, and that's also helping us to improve the product. So tomorrow, if you are a customer, if you want to use this, anybody can go into this. Anybody can clone the GitHub repo. If you have a DevOps pipeline organization, you can use that method, which is much easier and simplified process to deploy using Azure DevOps pipelines. And probably you may have seen this slide a couple of times, Goran, in the last YouTube video as well. Some of the key features, whether you're looking to build getting support for availability sets configuration, availability zone support, you want to have a proximity placement group combination, different databases, both for HANA or any DB support, different tiers, whether you want to use ANF or Azure files, all this sort of different permutations and combinations are available on the product. And of course, there are many more which are coming down the line in the roadmap as well.
Which will we soon hear.
Exactly. Now, in terms of the actual automation framework, it's basically divided into two parts. The first is the management zone. So when you are deploying the first artifact, you're going to deploy a deployer, which is deploy a VM. Think of it as a cockpit from where you can fire all the Ansible roles. And then you have another resource group, which is SAP library. This is where you have two containers, one which is used for storing the state file for Terraform, and the second one which is used for all the media that is you're going to use for installation of SAP systems. So once this base is set up, then you can define and design your workload zones. Workload zones are effectively a mapping to your SAP tiers. For example, your development, for example, your QA or test, all the way up to prod. So you can have one-to-one mapping for the workload zones in that case. And then you can deploy the resources for the virtual machines with all the combinations that we were just talking about, availability sets, availability zones, different SKUs, different storage configurations. So there is a lot of customization available as part of the product. And the final piece is the actual installation of SAP systems. So, installation of HANA, S/4HANA, NetWeaver, high availability configurations, pacemaker configurations, any DB that I'm going to talk about a little bit in the new release, which has been released towards the end of June as well. Which actually takes me to the latest updates. And let me.
So this is basically, which is what I understand, not yet officially published, coming soon, maybe in a week or something like this. So I mean, that's a super special highlight of this session, actually, and preview information for the whole audience, right, on the new stuff. Not yet actually being published, but coming soon.
Absolutely. So some of them are published in this one. There are one or two in the list which are important one as well, and they are going to be coming up next week, in next 2 weeks. So let me share my screen. Is that visible?
Yeah, it's visible. It's excellent.
Yeah. So the first thing which we have done is we have added the RISE guidance in the networking section. So there was an article from Robert where it explained with all the different combinations, connections. We wanted to make sure that customers don't miss out on that when they are connecting to Landing Zone Accelerator. So if we scroll down here, what you're going to see is design considerations for RISE implementations. And this is exactly where it is pointing back. So that is the structure which is available within the Landing Zone Accelerator. Another point was around the change of PPG configuration for the databases, right, within availability zone concept. That is something which we have also added into a documentation here, which is this bit here. So when you are looking to use PPGs in availability zones, now we generally don't recommend putting databases into the virtual machines, into the PPG configuration, right? So that part which has been added into the Landing Zone Accelerator. The thing which is also coming up now is if you look at our original documentation with the Microsoft Docs, we have a whole section for storage. So we are looking to bring the links into the Landing Zone Accelerator piece, either under business continuity and disaster recovery section, or probably create a separate new critical design area which says storage, and then it starts to point out to the right places. So that way the customers have got the first level place where they can go and look, and they don't miss out on anything and any pieces, right? Now talking about the work which is in preview. Let me just share this. So one of the feedback that we got from the partners when we were running some of these workshops, automation workshops, the Landing Zone Accelerator workshops, is they are looking for some reference architecture which is covering SAP production, non-production, the entire landscape, right? And that's exactly what we have tried to provide with this, where if you look at a number of architectures which have been published, you would find one SAP S/4HANA system, and everything is revolving around that SAP S/4HANA system. Is usually one SAP SID mentioned in the documents. With this effort, working with engineering teams, working with other teams, what we have done is we are trying to give a holistic picture when it comes to SAP and non-SAP production systems. So, for example, this subscription which is spanning across for production and disaster recovery. For example, having your non-production systems in this other subscription. How do they look like? What are the different services? How they're connecting with your hub network? How is the connectivity looking like with your BTP services? What if you're using ANF with delegated subnet, that sort of pictures. And we have also represented some of the data services that customers might be using for their data analytics platform. So a lot of information is flowing through, again from traffic which is coming from outside, from internet, so use of application gateways. So that's something which is in preview, and we are looking to get it out by next 2 weeks. Again, within that as well, we have also given an example systems. For example, let's say if you have SAP production, say ECC system, a PI, and a BW system, or an S/4HANA, a PO, or a BW4 system, right? So this is where we are showcasing how the example architecture is going to look like in terms of, this is for availability sets. So for example, if you see here, it's a big visual, so I'm going to focus a little bit more on production. So can you see each and every component has been designed and mentioned into this documentation? What subnets they are sending in? They have their own set of availability sets, ANF information, AFS information, traffic coming from outside, disaster recovery, NFS synchronization applications, cloud witness, connectivity to BTP. We're trying to cover at least the ground level view in terms of an example architecture with this one. Again, not just a production system, but if I go a little bit up, you will find another subscription which is covering all the non-production systems. And we are also thinking, we are also putting a documentation to that, explaining the architecture and what are the different options available as well, because at the end of the day, if you look at customer architectures, I'm sure you know, Garan, they'll look very different from each other. Yes. Although the base services would be same, but they will have a different combination. They will have different set of services being used. Yes. So we have tried to use all the generic services, and then customers, obviously, depending on whether they are using, they're using Linux or they're using Windows or whether they're using ANF for storage, they can pick and choose, and then they can adapt this architecture for their own design decisions.
But I love this. I love to see some examples. Just give me some example and explain me why you did it like this. And then you could either copy 100% or you might adapt according to your needs, right?
Exactly.
But this is, I love it. It's just a bird view. I get everything, so to say, here. Yeah. So with sub BTP as well, and different subscription, different roles. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, so that was the main update, which is which is coming in next 1 to 2 weeks time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, I mean, we are lucky to have you, just to have some preview on the stuff which will come soon and to understand why. So, I mean, the audience is warmly welcome to check it. I don't know, are you planning also to announce it in some of the blog on SAP on Azure, the newest stuff, or they should just go to the SAP on Azure Landing Zone Accelerator pages? How is your plan? Just to get it update, you know, when this is kind of ready.
Yeah. So obviously, I've already started now with your channel. So.
Okay, excellent. But this creates also expectations, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. This is the final architecture. We have done all the final edits into it. It's just the PR which needs to go and get published. Excellent. So yeah. we are ready.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, it's always because when you, especially when you start the journey, there's so many details, you know, and just to have those kind of materials ready for me and the best practices, and I see also in the document what you were showing just recently, they are really the latest updates. You know, use the standard internal load balancer as an example. Don't use the PPG for the database, for example. They are really, I mean, they are really the latest updates, and they all make sense. And there are so many of them. So, I mean, this is something which definitely simplifies the whole migration process and speeding it up. And really, I mean, I feel confident when I see this. You know, I feel, I mean, if I would be a customer, I feel confident, you know, that we should not, you know, reinvent the wheel, you know. So just use what other go through the path, what other threaded and which is showing to work, right? So exactly. I mean, really looking forward to these new updates. Really looking forward. We'll put all the links. Happy, Pankaj, happy to have you on the channel. And again, hope you want to show some other stuff as well on the. There
was one last from automation perspective.
Oh, excellent.
Which I want to make sure the viewers are paying attention to, which is the release 3.4.0 on the automation. As I was mentioning about the automation, a lot of feedback is coming from partners, from customers, and we also have products in roadmap. If you see now, we have ability to deploy Oracle systems, whether you want to do a standalone deployment, whether you want to do high availability with Oracle Data Guard, or whether you want to do shared home installations. Similarly, there was a lot of customers who were asking for ANF for HANA data and log files, shared volume. So that's something which is available now. So whether you want to do HANA with ANF for SAP MMT or installation media, or whether if you want to use it for transport directly. So that sort of combinations are also available. AFS, as you know very well, is also available. So we have added that combinations as well. The team has been working very hard in getting all this out to the market. Azure DevOps, as I mentioned, deployment of SAP systems using Azure DevOps. So any customer can literally, if they have a DevOps organization, copy the repo into your DevOps organization, look into a documentation, understand the basic functioning of pipelines, and then you can deploy SAP systems using pipelines. So you know all the steps that I was mentioning about in terms of management zone, workload zone, SAP system deployment, everything through pipelines. And the final, some of the edits were around. A lot of customers mentioned about they need virtual hostname support as well. So that's something which has been added. Bill of material is something which is always evolving based on different customers, different customer requirements. But again, this is a customer choice. We have a process which they can use to create their own bill of materials for their bespoke requirements. So that was my final update.
Excellent. And what I also last session we had on Cameron Gardner on Oracle. He also recommended just use the latest Oracle 19 if you can. It's super to see it, you know, and also super to see, as well, the NetWeaver on Oracle as a foundation. So as you mentioned, I mean, customer can also customize it if they would need it. But that's a huge progress. I mean, that's a huge progress. Virtual host name I also seen in the practice. simply because they want to separate through the security. They want to have a bigger names for virtual machine and operating system, and with SAP you are bound to 13 characters of the host name, so meaning you have to use virtual host name. So this is really great to see it as well. Great progress. I mean, looking forward really also to see some of those content live soon. And Pankaj, thank you very much for coming, and I mean, hope to see you again.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting into the session. Always a pleasure to come into this session and talk about the latest and greatest on what's happening on SAP on Azure. Right?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.